Welcome back to the channel. Before I get into the discussion, if you'd like to receive more content like this, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. What if I told you that a single economic policy could make or break entire industries, influence elections, and change the global balance of power? That's exactly what tariffs can do. Welcome to today's deep dive into one of the most divisive economic and geopolitical debates, US tariffs. Are tariffs a necessary tool to protect American jobs and industries? Or are they raising prices, isolating the US, and pushing the allies towards new trading partners? In today's discussion, we'll cover what tariffs are and why the US imposes them, arguments for and against tariffs. Do they help or hurt the economy? The impact of Trump's rhetoric on tariffs and its unintended consequences, and can the USA win the trade war? Let's listen to President Trump in a discussion with the press on tariffs before we discuss tariffs.
For years, I saw that. I had it out with him in my first term. It did well, but we had to solve other problems, and we did. But European Union's been very tough, and it's our turn too. You know, we get a turn at that also, but they have not been fair. They sue our companies and win massive amounts of money. They sued Apple, won $17 billion, and they use that for other reasons, I guess, or to run the European Union. So I'm not knocking it. They're doing what they should be doing, perhaps, for the European Union, but it does create ill will. And as you know, we're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs. So whatever they charge us, we're charging them. Nobody can complain about that. Whatever it is, it doesn't even matter what it is. If they charge us 25 or 20% or 10% or 2% or 200%, then that's what we're charging them. And so I don't know why people get upset about that, because there's nothing more fair than that. And we had a problem with Ontario, and they dropped that when I let them know what we were going to be doing. They dropped it immediately, so I'm glad, because electricity, you shouldn't be playing with electricity. It affects people's lives. Actually their life. I mean, it can affect, depending on weather, it can affect their life. So we can't do that.
So what are tariffs, and why does the US use them? Let's start with the basics. What are tariffs? Is a tax on imported goods. What's the purpose of tariffs? Make foreign goods more expensive, so people buy more American-made products, generate revenues for the government, punish countries that engage in unfair trade practices, like China's state-subsidized industries or currency manipulation, and protect domestic industries from foreign competition. But do tariffs really help the US? Let's break down the arguments for and against tariffs. Let's start with arguments for tariffs. Number one, and there's about, I would say, 5 or 6 reasons why some people support tariffs. One, tariffs shield domestic industries from foreign competition by making imports more expensive. Governments around the world implement policies to protect domestic industries from foreign competition, ensuring economic stability and job security for their citizens. Tariffs shield domestic industries by making foreign imports more expensive, encouraging consumers to buy domestic products, such as American products. This protection is especially critical for industries like steel, agriculture, and technology, which face intense competition from countries with government-subsidized industries. For example, you think about US Steel and farming sectors, and as the chart shows you, before and after tariffs. Before tariffs, industries like steel may be really doing well, and subsequently, after tariffs, maybe more challenging, could be the reverse for farming. So it could go either way. Think about it. Example would be cheap Chinese steel imports undercut US producers, leading to factory closures. Tariffs basically would then level the playing field, helping American steelmakers remain competitive. Number two, reducing trade deficits. The US runs a massive trade deficit, especially with China, as you can see from the chart. And in fact, US run a massive trade deficit with a number of its major trading partners. What's the impact of tariffs? Tariffs aim to reduce imports and encourage domestic production, helping the US balance its trade books. And think about, what is a trade deficit? And are tariffs the only viable means to reduce such deficits? A trade deficit occurs when a country imports more goods and services than it exports, leading to a net outflow of capital. The US imports far more than it exports, leading, for example, to a massive trade deficit with China. While tariffs alone cannot eliminate the deficit, they serve as a tool to level the playing field in global trade. Number three, enhancing national security through tariffs. Tariffs can play a critical role in national security by protecting key industries that are vital to a country's defense and infrastructure. Certain industries like defense, energy, and semiconductors are vital to national security. If the US relies too much on foreign supplies, it risks shortages during global crises or conflicts. Tariffs help to ensure these industries remain strong domestically. And you can see here an example of what sort of supply chain looks like in the graph as it relates to the start of the process through the end of the process, starting from when raw materials all the way to the consumer. Number four, tariffs encourages domestic investment and job creation. By making imports more expensive, tariffs incentivize companies to invest in US manufacturing rather than relying on cheap foreign labor. This leads to job creation, increased wages, and long-term economic growth. As you can see from the chart, after tariffs were imposed, some companies expanded domestic production, reducing reliance on foreign factories. Number five, tariff creates leverage in trade negotiations. Tariffs aren't just about economics. They're also a strategic tool in trade negotiations. By imposing tariffs, the US can pressure other countries to lower their own trade barriers or agree to fairer trade deals. And many companies and countries have complained about doing business in China, for example, where they impose restrictions on the ability to access their markets. And tariffs can help to make those negotiations more fair, provide access to such markets. Trump tariffs on Chinese goods led to the phase one trade deal, where China agreed to increase purchases of US agriculture and industrial products. And last but not least, number six, countering unfair trade practices. Countries like China engage in practices that give their industries an unfair advantage, such as intellectual property theft, currency manipulations, and government subsidies. Tariffs serve as a countermeasure to these tactics. For example, intellectual property theft. China has been accused of stealing US technology through forced tech transfers and cyber espionage. Currency manipulation. A weaker yuan makes Chinese goods artificially cheaper, and they've been an example. just countries like Japan with the yen, lowering the value of the yen to allow it to export more goods at a cheaper price. And then there's dumping. Government subsidized industries allow foreign companies to flood the US market with ultra cheap goods. While tariffs can protect industries, they don't come without a cost. We just looked at the arguments for tariffs. Let's now look at the arguments against them. What are such arguments? Number one, strained international relations. Tariffs just don't impact trade, they affect global diplomacy. US tariffs on allies like Canada, the EU, and Japan often lead to retaliatory tariffs, straining long term relationships. For example, the EU is now strengthening trade ties with China, India, and Latin America to reduce reliance on the US. Canada and the EU imposed retaliatory tariffs on US steel, worsening relations. And you can hear the narrative more recently between Canada and the US, very confrontational. And those relationships, which have been really tight over the years, are now very, very strained. Number two, US jobs. Are tariffs protection or job killer? Do tariffs actually serve US jobs or are they backfiring? Tariffs may help to protect industries like steel and aluminum, but retaliatory tariffs hit other sectors hard, especially agriculture and auto manufacturing. A recent Federal Reserve study found tariffs led to 0.6% drop in US manufacturing jobs overall. Also, in the tariff war with China under the previous Trump administration, US farmers lost billions in sales due to China's counter tariffs. So, what's the bottom line? While some jobs are saved, some would say more are lost, raising the question, are tariffs worth it? Number three, economic inefficiency and reduced innovation. Tariffs actually distort market forces, forcing customers and businesses to buy pricier domestic goods instead of cheaper imports. And you can see from the chart, US job gains and losses from tariffs. What are the key issues? Are higher cost for businesses, reduced competitiveness, fewer incentives to innovate, protected industries grow inefficient, and resource misallocation. Government picks winners and losers. And the bottom line here is tariffs benefit a few industries at the expense of the overall economic growth. Number four, disrupting global supply chain. Modern businesses rely on global supply chains. Tariffs make key raw materials like steel, aluminum, and semiconductors more expensive, raising production costs and leading to higher consumer prices. For example, take Apple. Tariffs on Chinese components would raise iPhone prices. Or in the auto industry, higher steel prices increase car costs. Some companies move production offshore to avoid tariffs, which also lead to US job losses. Number five, retaliation from trading partners. Tariffs provoke retaliation, making US goods more expensive overseas. For example, China stopped buying US soybeans, and the EU imposed tariffs on US pork and dairy products. What's the result? US farmers, automakers, and manufacturers face declining exports and revenue losses. And last but not least, number six, higher, which is probably most important, higher consumer prices. Tariffs act like a hidden tax on consumers, raising the cost of everyday goods like cars, electronics, clothing, and food. For example, Trump's auto tariffs added thousands to the price of new cars, and tariffs on Chinese goods increased costs for smartphones, laptops, and appliances. Obviously, these were in the previous Trump administration, and we'll see what happens this time around as he has effected tariffs on a number of goods for a number of countries. What's the biggest impact if you think about consumer prices? Low and middle income families who spend a larger share of their income on necessities will feel the pain of higher prices for consumers. What's the bottom line? Higher prices equal less consumer spending equal, which is an imperative, which is important, slower economic growth. Now, it's one thing to have tariffs and to have conflicts with your allies and, for lack of a better word, your opponent. But Trump's rhetoric also, in terms of how you go about this, doesn't help.
Deal with every country, indirectly or directly. One of the nastiest countries to deal with is Canada. The people that, now this was Trudeau, the people that good old Justin, I call him Governor Trudeau, his people were nasty. And they weren't telling the truth. They never told the truth. You know that, they'd say, well, we don't charge. Well, they do. They charge tremendous. They charge tremendous. And if you look at dairy products, what they've done to our farmers, I'd go up to Iowa, I'd go up to different places, Nebraska, and they would always complain about Canada, how they get ripped off. Do you know that Canada has a 250% tariff? 250, nobody knows that. They charge us numbers that are crazy.
One of the most overlooked aspects of trade negotiation, frankly, isn't just what is said, but where, when, and how it's said. As you can hear from these excerpts from two ministers from the Canadian government, when world leaders are forced to respond aggressively to Trump, trade negotiations becomes personal, not just economic. That can delay or even kill trade deals that have been mutually beneficial.
Today, I am announcing that the Government of Canada, following a dollar-for-dollar approach, will be imposing, as of 12:01 a.m. tomorrow, March 13th, 2025, 25% reciprocal tariffs on an additional $29.8 billion of imports from the United States. This includes steel products worth $12.6 billion and aluminum products worth $3 billion, as well as additional imported U.S. goods worth $14.2 billion for a total of $29.8 billion.
This is much more than about our economy. It is about the future of our country. Canadian sovereignty and identity are non-negotiable. Canadians have had enough, and we are a strong country who will defend our sovereignty, will defend our jobs, and will defend our way of living. And we will do so all together every single day and one day at a time.
No leader in any country wants to be bullied or showed up on the international stage. Diplomacy works best behind closed doors, where you may have fights, but it's not in the public domain. Politicians and leaders are very cognizant of how they're perceived by their electorate. And if they're bullied in public, they're going to want to respond. So diplomacy is best effected and put in place in an environment where you can negotiate tough, but both come out almost in a win-win situation. And Trump's rhetoric and his bullying tactics forces leaders to respond accordingly. No one is saying that there may not be unfair tariffs out there in the marketplace. If you look at, for example, tariffs charged on American cars being sold in Europe and vice versa, there's much more tariffs charged by the EU than by the US. However, those negotiations can be done more subtle and with more diplomacy in place versus the bullying tactics that's deployed or employed in a public domain. What's the final thoughts? Can the US win the trade war? So, where does the US stand in the global trade war? Let's break it down. The case for tariffs. They protect key industries like steel and agriculture. They reduce trade deficits by encouraging imports. They counter unfair trade practices like intellectual property theft and currency manipulation. They create leverage in negotiation, pushing countries towards fairer deals. The case against tariffs. They strain diplomatic relations, pushing allies to trade elsewhere. They hurt US workers in agriculture, auto manufacturing, and export-driven industries. They raise the cost for businesses and consumers, leading to inflation, and they provoke retaliation, making US goods less competitive globally. So, can the US truly win the trade war? That depends on what winning looks like. If the goal is to protect domestic industries, bring back manufacturing jobs back home, and challenge unfair trade, tariffs might work, but they come at a steep cost. Higher prices, job losses, and economic uncertainty make them a double-edged sword. Now listen to this UK reporter and Dr. Mohammed El-Arian, president of Queen's College, Cambridge University in England, discussing the use of tariffs by the USA and the implication of this strategy. And Dr. Mohammed was previously in the Obama administration.
Well, earlier I spoke to the acclaimed economist Mohammed El-Arian, president of Queen's College, Cambridge, and formerly chair of President Obama's Global Development Council. And I began by asking him what outcomes he thinks President Trump is aiming for.
I think he wants multiple outcomes. That's why he loves the concept so much. First, he wants to use it as a tool to get other countries to do what he wants them to do.
Right.
Secondly, he thinks of it as a tool to raise lots of revenue. And thirdly, he thinks of it as a tool to promote domestic companies.
So if we break them down a little bit, let's just take domestic manufacturing, for example, and encouraging global companies to relocate production to the US. That could take years.
It could, but it will start a process that will bear fruit for the US for years as well. It also will encourage domestic industries that are already there. It will give them an advantage over imports by making imports either more expensive or less profitable for other countries to send to the US.
But it is a big political risk, isn't it?
I think the problem with this whole thing is that in the short term, it will work.
Right.
The US is relatively strong, both cyclically and structurally. So other countries can resist, but they will not resist for long. The challenge is over the longer term, this is going to encourage other countries to reduce their interactions with the US.
And then we enter this threat of a global trade war.
That's the worry. I think what we really are looking at is a fragmentation of the global system. We're looking at more blocks around the world, more axes of convenience. And what we lose is the ability to address common problems collectively.
And there are clearly implications here, potential implications for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who has staked her reputation, staked her entire economic plan on growth.
So the good news is that so far, President Trump has not mentioned the UK. My hope, and I have no basis for that hope other than hope, is that the UK has found a way to preempt the threat of tariffs. And there are ways to preempt the threat of tariffs.
How so?
By offering the US better access in a couple of areas where the US has felt discriminated against. Healthcare is one.
Lots of people will read that as privatization of our beloved quote unquote NHS.
Yeah, it need not go anywhere near the privatization of NHS. But to be clear, we are not in a world of first best or second best. We are in a world that's far away from that. And the question on everybody's mind outside the US is, how do I minimize the damage to an economy that is already struggling?
And a final thought on whether tariffs actually do work as an economic instrument.
If it's a one-off thing, then individual countries and the global economy can accommodate that. If this is what game theorists call the repeated game, it keeps on happening over and over and over again, it will fundamentally change how the global economy operates, to the bad fortune of many countries.
Dr. Al-Erian, thank you very much indeed for joining us and your insight.
As you heard from Dr. Al-Erian, there are immediate benefits to be gained from tariffs, especially given the size of the US economy, but they can have negative long-term implications. Some experts argue that instead of relying on tariffs, the US should focus on investing in innovation, strengthening local industries, and negotiating better trade deals without escalating conflicts. Others believe tariffs are necessary to level the playing field against economic giants like China. The truth is, there is no easy win or easy answer. So, what do you think? Are tariffs helping or hurting America? Should the US double down, or is there a smarter way to compete globally? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.